when technology becomes faster than people. What happens to those who are afraid to be left behind? This is the story of two designer sisters. One believes in art, the other in progress, and the world around them is changing faster than they are ready to accept.
Sometimes I think my sister and I weren't born 7 years apart, but into two different centuries. It wasn't about our age. 7 years isn't much. It was about the fundamental pace of our lives. Mine kept accelerating, demanding more, faster. Hers held its ground, familiar, stubborn, like an old metronome refusing to speed up for anyone. I didn't understand any of that back then. I just thought the world divided people into two simple camps, those who got technology and those who simply didn't try. I saw her resistance as weakness. This is the story of how wrong I was, and how close we came to losing everything, our livelihood and each other, because of a technology that was supposed to save us time. We shared a small studio apartment, a tiny kitchen, 2 desks crammed into one corner by a window that leaked cold air in the winter. We were both designers, technically peers, but she was always ahead of me in everything that truly mattered: experience, reputation, patience. My sister Mira was the kind of artist whose work felt warm, even on cold digital paper. She could make a pencil line breathe. Clients loved her for that human touch. Me? I loved speed. I loved experimentation, the thrill of exploring 1,000 choices in an hour. When AI tools began revolutionizing design, image generators, smart assistants, automatic prototyping, it felt natural. It wasn't cheating, it was expansion. Like suddenly having 10 extra hands that could sketch faster than I could think. I felt like the future, but to Mira, it felt like a betrayal. I couldn't grasp her rejection. Why turn down a shortcut? Why embrace the struggle? Our desks became a visual representation of the conflict. Mine was minimalist, clean, bathed in the cool light of my 4K monitor. Hers was chaos and texture. Stacks of worn sketchbooks, tubes of paint, specialized pencils she imported from Japan, and always the faint, earthy smell of graphite. In those weeks, I leaned heavily into AI prototyping. It gave me an intoxicating sense of power. A concept that used to take a day now took 30 minutes. I could explore hundreds of compositions and color palettes with a few prompts. I felt like an architect who no longer had to draw. I just manifested the building. I tried desperately to sell her on the freedom of it all. Look, Mira, I type Victorian style, jungle landscape, neon light, and I get a base I can refine. This is liberation from grunt work.
Liberation, you call it? You're liberating yourself from the need to think. You're liberating yourself from the labor. Every line I put down is a decision. It's a struggle. You just ask a machine for the answer.
I'm not asking for an answer, I'm asking for options. To get to the right answer faster. While you wrestle with one shadow, I've discarded 40 bad ideas, and am focusing on the best one.
And that is the problem, Lisa. You see art as a race. I see it as a process. And when you remove the process, you remove a piece of the soul. Your pictures are shiny, they're clean, but they're empty. They don't know what a mistake feels like. And without mistakes, there is no growth.
Her words stung. Empty. I knew she had a point, which only fueled my anger. I saw depth in her work, but I was convinced she was trapped by her methods. One evening, I found her reading an online article about AI potentially replacing 80% of illustration designers. Her face was pale. Mira, that's clickbait. No one is replacing a good artist. It's just a new tool, like Photoshop or the airbrush before that. There's always panic.
This isn't an airbrush. An airbrush doesn't learn from you. It doesn't steal our work, our uniqueness, feed it into an algorithm, and then produce something that looks like us but doesn't have us inside it. This is theft.
She stood up, took her tools, and retreated to her tiny bedroom, leaving me alone. From that day on, we stopped talking about work. We entered a state of workplace hostility. I worked even faster to prove my path was correct. I finished projects in record time, and the income validated my efficiency. At the end of the month, I proudly placed my half of the rent on her table. Mira took the money silently, but her eyes held a quiet resentment. She had struggled from dawn till dusk, pouring herself into her projects, while I, the button presser, had earned just as much. The sense of unfairness poisoned the air. We were on the verge of a complete breakdown, and neither of us wanted to be the first to acknowledge the chasm. It was into this fragile silence that the message arrived. Late one evening, our studio was shrouded in that dense, strained quiet, following another day of separate work. On both our screens, the same alarming pop-up appeared. The message was from our biggest client, Zenith Corp. This was the kind of account that could define a career. The text was simple, but its effect was devastating.
Urgent. Need final design by morning. Complete logo concept, including full visualization and brand style guide.
Mira, who had been hunched over her work, slowly straightened up, her face illuminated by the screen's cold light. Drained of all color, she stared at the text as if it were a death sentence.
By morning? That's physically impossible. This scope requires a week, at least 3 days.
I felt a rush of adrenaline. In my AI accelerated system, impossible wasn't a word. It was a challenge. We can do it. Together, let me help, Mira. We'll divide the tasks. You handle the core sketch. She cut me off sharply. For the first time in weeks, her voice held steel.
No, don't. I'll do it. Myself.
Her look was absolute. This wasn't just a rejection of my help. It was a rejection of surrender. It was her final stand to prove her relevance in a world that was rapidly trying to make her obsolete. I stepped back, conceding to her pride and her fear, not realizing the immense cost of that concession. She plunged into work. It wasn't drawing. It was wrestling with the paper, the pencils, the clock. With every passing hour, the mounds of crumpled, failed sketches grew, forming a mound around her chair. I turned on my computer and began. The concept I generated took minutes. I didn't just use the AI, I directed it. I refined every curve, polished the texture, fine-tuned the lighting. By midnight, my work was flawless. I quietly went to bed, a deep sense of guilt twisting in my stomach over how effortlessly I had succeeded. Mira didn't sleep at all. Her desk light burned all night, a lonely, defiant beacon in the dark studio. Morning arrived with a thick, suffocating silence. The sun cast pale stripes onto the floor. I got up quietly and went to the kitchen. Mira was still at her desk. Her head was resting on her folded arms, surrounded by those crumpled paper mounds. Her face was pale, with dark shadows under her eyes. But the worst part wasn't the exhaustion. It was the posture of defeat. She hadn't finished. She raised her head, and in her eyes, I saw pure emptiness. You didn't finish.
I tried 20 different variants. Not one of them was good enough. I spent 6 hours just trying to get the right depth on a shadow. 6 hours. 6 hours. My AI would have done 6 hours of work in 6 seconds. The comparison was devastating.
I put a cup of coffee down for her. At that moment, the notification sounded again. The message from Zenith Corp. Hit both our screens simultaneously. Mira flinched. We both stared at the monitor. I opened it first. My heart hammered, not with pride, but with dread for my sister.
Wow, unbelievable. We're taking the younger sister's concept, perfect direction, exactly what we were looking for. Please send the final files.
A wave of hot and cold washed over me. It was a victory, but it felt like a heavy loss. Mira slowly looked at her unfinished sketch. She traced a thick pencil line, trying to hold on to its reality. Then her gaze lifted to mine. Her shoulders slumped just a millimeter. It was nearly imperceptible, but to me, it was a fall from grace.
Of course, who can compete with a machine?
I started to speak, to defend myself, to explain it wasn't just the AI. Mira, it's not the machine, it's... She exploded. For the first time in years, she let go. Her voice cracked, soaring higher than I'd ever heard it.
You don't even work yourself anymore. You just press buttons. You don't know the pain of finding the perfect form, the sweat of despair. You sit there, commanding a program that steals ideas from other artists, and you call it your art.
She stood up, knocking her chair backward. Her fury wasn't just directed at me, it was aimed at this new, cruel world.
What am I going to do in a year? In 2 years? You think clients will pay me when they can get what I do in a day for free in a second? You're not just taking my job, you're taking my future.
Her voice fractured on the last word, and something in me broke too. I wanted to yell back, call her unfair, tell her she was clinging to the past. But then I saw her tears, not tears of rage, but tears of pure, raw fear. This wasn't an argument between designers. This was a cry for survival. I saw not the stubborn artist rejecting progress, but a person seeing their entire identity and means of living rendered irrelevant. The fear of being left behind. I looked away. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. My silence was worse than any argument. It was an acceptance of her accusation. I grabbed my laptop and left her alone in the ruined studio. I spent the rest of the day wandering the city. My phone buzzed with client messages, congratulations, and requests for the next phase. I should have felt like a conqueror, but I felt like a thief. I kept hearing her words, "You just press buttons." Was she right? How much of that victory was my choice, and how much was simply a successful generation? My work was meaningful. I chose the tone, picked the best composition, made crucial refinements, but how much was truly mine? Mira never had that question. Every millimeter of her drawing belonged to her, from the tentative first sketch to the final deep shadow. I returned to the studio late that evening. The lights were off. I found her sitting in the dark, staring at her hands, not drawing, not scrolling, just staring at the tools she used to define herself. Those hands were now empty. They looked small. This image, Mira, reduced and alone in the darkness, hit me harder than any of her accusations. I understood that the technological progress that felt like wings to me felt like an existential threat to her. I cautiously sat down next to her on the floor. "Mira, can I show you something?" She didn't answer. She didn't turn away. That was enough. I opened my laptop and pulled up the final file I sent to Zenith Corporation. I opened the layers one by one. This is the base sketch. Yes, it was ready in 3 minutes. It set the form. Very clean, very correct. See how empty it is? I removed that base layer and showed her the hundreds of other layers I added all night. This is the composition. This was my choice. I opened up the negative space here to give it a sense of scale. And this is the lighting. I chose a cold light to convey reliability. The color palette. I insisted on this specific shade of blue that speaks of. I paused, pointing out the microscopic, almost invisible strokes that gave the texture depth. And this, Mira, the emotion. The machine offered logo. I prompted logo that speaks of eternity and trust. I forced it to do that. I looked at her. She finally turned her head. There was no anger, only confusion.
Mira. So, it doesn't replace you?
No, it gives me speed. But it doesn't think, Mira. It doesn't make the choice. It doesn't aim to convey a feeling. As you said, it doesn't know what a mistake is, so it doesn't know what intentional beauty is. I turned the screen toward her. It's like a pencil with a jet engine, but I'm still the one steering. Mira blinked a few times, absorbing the idea. Then she asked the most important, most vulnerable question she could have asked.
What about me?
I smiled. This was the moment I realized our conflict wasn't about technique. It was about value. You do things no AI ever could. You feel the material. You breathe life into it. I can generate 1,000,000 perfect lines, but you can draw one that breathes. I reached out my hand. I want you to teach me that soul. I want my speed to serve your depth. Something heavy, invisible, lifted from the room. A lifelong weight was gone.
And maybe I can learn the speed from you.
That was the moment everything changed. From that day, things began to shift. It wasn't a fairy tale transformation. It was a slow, persistent change, like erosion that finally yields to water. The hardest part was breaking the habit of conflict. But for the first time in years, we sat at our desks as a team. Mira became my most demanding art director. Here, Mira, I generated 50 landscape variants for the campaign. Take your pick.
Lisa, stop. I don't want 50. Show me the 3 you think are best.
She gave me focus. My strength was overwhelming the problem with options. Her strength was isolating the single right path. We began working on a project for a winery. The client wanted a label that married old European tradition with modern elegance. I quickly generated a base, Gothic font, medieval symbols, rich palette, technically perfect, ideal textures.
Boring. Cold. Where is the wine? Where is the earth? There's no history. The machine did this.
I wasn't offended. I knew she was right. We started a hybrid process. I'd work at the AI, and Mira would sit beside me, pencil ready to make immediate notes.
Stop. That one. Variant 5. Do you see the shadow behind the letter R? It's too clean. It shouldn't be. Wine, Lisa, is imperfect.
She took my digital draft, printed it out, and began using her living pencil to correct the image. She added the tiniest, almost invisible artifacts, microscopic flaws in the wood texture, as if touched by a craftsman's hand. She ensured the edges of the font looked slightly worn by time. These small, humanizing details, which the AI couldn't create because it strove for perfection, made the image live. You added breath to the shadow. How do you do that?
It's not breath. It's history. I make the shadow look like it has been there for 300 years. AI sees only light and the absence of light. I see how light and time interact.
I saw my speed transform into a vehicle for her mastery. I could generate 100 options, and she could choose one and instantly, with a few strokes, breathe a soul into it that no program could generate. We became the perfect pairing. Mira provided form, I provided speed. Mira, the soul, I, the versatility. We laughed, we debated. But now our debates weren't about who was right, but about how to make the client's work better. I think this specific typeface is too pretentious.
Yes, but it's fast. You can generate it. And I will break it. I will give it weariness and sincerity.
We soon landed another major project, one that demanded both velocity and depth. This time, there was no panic. There was only the process. I would create the perfect but soulless base, and Mira would sit beside me, editing not the design, but its story. Just weeks into our new rhythm, we got the feedback on that first joint project for the winery. The message came from the client.
The best project we have ever received. You two are an incredible team. It feels modern, yet it has this timeless authenticity.
Mira looked at me. I looked at her. This was a victory we had earned together. We bumped fists, the way we did as kids when making a secret pact. In that tiny gesture, in that new partnership, I felt my world finally click into place. People say technology divides generations. Maybe sometimes it does. But I know now that it's not the tool itself that divides us. What divided us was the fear behind the tool. AI didn't ruin us. Pride almost did. My misunderstanding of her vulnerability almost did. Our long, strained silence almost did. But once we finally talked, once I saw her fear, and she saw my need for her mastery, we found each other again. I learned to value slow, deep work. Mira learned to trust speed. Now when people ask me what AI means to me in design, I tell them this. AI means time. It means possibilities. It means momentum. But meaning, story, purpose, those still only come from us, from the human hand, from the things we feel, from the choices we make. Sometimes, late at night, I look over at Mira working beside me. Her hands still move slower than mine. Her lines are still deliberate, intentional, and it is beautiful. I realize that speed isn't everything. Efficiency isn't everything. What matters is what we build together. And if there's one thing I learned through all of this, it's that technology is not the enemy. Fear is. And connection, that is the real art.